What's up, trainers? Jumpmaster here, bringing you exciting Pokemon Go news and updates with tips and tricks on how to enhance your Pokemon Go gameplay and experience. As a bonus, I will be conducting Pokemon trading card game card openings, which will include boxes, packs, tins, promotional cards, and offers. Today, we will be going over the Sinister Cup. The Sinister Cup is simple. Ghost, Psychic, Steel fighting types only. No dark types to include dual typing. No Mythical, Skarmory, or Hypno. Taking a look at my team, I am running Mawile, Poliwrath, Steelix, Driftbloom, Gallade, and Alolan Marowak. My first opponent is Forte. Forte is playing with Chimco, Blaziken, Lucario, Frostlass, Hitmonchan, and Steelix. I see that he has a 3-fighter team, so I know that I must come with my Gallade into the battles. Going into the first match, I lead with Gallade, and he leads with Frostlass. I'm just going to farm that Frostlass until he throws his first Shadow Ball at me, which I will block, and then I will return a Leaf Blade back at him. He lets his Frostlass go down, and out comes Lucario. And then he immediately switches to Blaziken. So, since I have him switch locked, I will switch into my Poliwrath. And I will take this Blast Burn or Blaze Kick, which is what he throws at me, and continue just to farm down his Blaziken. And I wanted to power up my Poliwrath just a little bit before that Lucario came back out, so I would have a stronger bubble effect, knowing that I would get to another power-up punch. He did block my power-up punch. I know that I do have a shield left, so I will use it here. I will get to one more power-up punch. I do not remember if he shields or not, and he does not. He just lets his Lucario go down. During the second game, I decided to lead with, I think, Gallade again, and he leads with Chimco. So here I now have a pretty sturdy matchup, so I'm going to farm his Chimco down with my Gallade and wait for that first attack to come in. I will throw up my shield to block that Shadow Ball, and then immediately switch out into my Poliwrath and start building up my power-up punches to increase the attack damage of my bubble. Here he throws another Shadow Ball at my Poliwrath, but that's fine. We're just going to tank that, and out comes his Steelix. I'm going to launch, I think, a power-up punch followed by another power-up punch immediately to start inflicting as much damage as I can towards this Steelix. And I get to another power-up punch before he gets to his Crunch or his Earthquake. Now I know he does have plenty of energy saved up on this Steelix. I do want to save my Poliwrath, so I just blocked and then farmed down his Steelix. Out comes Hitmonchan. So I throw my power-up punch thinking it would be something else. I immediately switch into my Gallade and let this Leaf Blade off, which takes pretty much all of his health, and then use my Confusion Fast Attack to go ahead and knock out that Hitmonchan. Going into the third match, I choose to lead with Alolan Marowak. He leads with Blaziken. I know that during this match my Shadow Ball should be able to KO that Blaziken if I can get to it. And Blaziken should take super effective damage from this Bone Club. And he does, so I launch another one right back. And he chooses to shield, which lets me know that he has some energy saved up and he will be throwing another Blaze Kick at me. So I decide to block it and then just farm down his Blaziken. He comes out with Steelix. Although this is a positive matchup for Alolan Marowak, I do not have the health in order to sustain, so I switch into my Poliwrath and start throwing bubbles. And the whole object here is to just continuously power up punch and boost those bubble attacks. I was worried this was an earthquake, but it wasn't. It was just a crunch, so I did waste my shield. He did get that bait on me. Out comes a Frostlass, so I will launch power up punch at that Frostlass, and as you can see, those bubbles are just starting to do massive amounts of damage to his Pokemon, even though they're only bubbles. His Frostlass will launch off a Shadow Ball at my Poliwrath. I do sustain and throw my final power-up punch that I would get to, and then immediately switch into my Gallade and just confusion down his Frostlass. Looking at my next opponent is Regilope. He's playing with Dusclops, Alolan Marowak, Poliwrath, Gallade, Bastiodon, and Medicham. All this right here really came down to was the proper picks. Regilope beat me all 3 matches. I led wrong all the times. So let's take a look at what I did and see what I did wrong. Starting up this first match, I lead with my Mawile. He leads with his Poliwrath. I know this is a positive matchup for Poliwrath, so I immediately switch into my Gallade, and he locks me in place with his Dusclops. I should have farmed him down a little bit more there before launching that Leaf Blade. His Dusclops throws off his first charge attack, so I will block it. I will launch another Leaf Blade, and he is going to block this with his Dusclops, trying to sustain his Dusclops, and he will get off another Shadow Punch. Here I let my Gallade go. I should have let my Gallade stay in. I should have used my last shield there. Instead, I come back in with my Mawile and use my fast attack to knock out his Dusclops. In comes his Poliwrath. His Poliwrath does have the positive matchup against my Mawile, so I will switch back out into my own Poliwrath, and then here comes his Alolan Marowak. This is not a positive matchup for my Poliwrath, so here I will continuously just try to use power-up punches and KO this Alolan Marowak. He has built up enough energy. I didn't know if he was throwing a Shadow Ball or a Bone Club. I get to another power-up punch, in which it's still not doing any damage. I am just trying to farm down his Alolan Marowak. I should have used my shield here and saved my Poliwrath. Or, I'm sorry, I was out of shield, so I couldn't save my Poliwrath. I could have got to a play rough right here. I don't know why I threw a power-up punch. I think in the moment of hesitation. That was definitely a misplay on my end. He will hit me with a power-up punch and then KO my Mawile. Going into the second game, I choose to lead with my Drifblim versus his Medicham. I do have the lead. He will immediately switch out into Alolan Marowak. I know that this is still a good matchup for my Drifblim, so I'm trying to bluff him and throw an Ominous Wind, which he did allow to go through onto his Alolan Marowak. I should have just farmed him down right there, and I didn't. I switched into my Mawile. He is throwing Bone Club back to back at my Mawile. I will knock out his Alolan Marowak. In comes his Medicham. I know that I'm not going to get to my play rough in time, and even if I did, he has 2 shield advantage, so I just threw the power-up punch to try to inflict as much damage as I could. In comes my Drifblim. He switches into his Bastiodon. So, as you can see right there, I did get Sticky Switch for a second. I did switch into my Steelix, which was a bad call on my end. I built up to an Earthquake, and then I tried to bluff him, and the shield bait worked. Now we're at the same shields. I should have used my shield on my Steelix right here, and I did. He threw a Flamethrower at me. Now I will throw an Earthquake at his Bastiodon, in which he will shield and block. He switches back out into his Medicham, and he's going to throw a power-up punch at my Steelix. Out comes my Drifblim. I KO his Medicham with the Shadow Ball, and then I know the only way for me to knock out this Bastiodon is to get to 2 Shadow Balls, and that is not going to happen on my part. He already has enough energy built up in order just to throw any attack and KO my Drifblim. I did not get to record the third match, but going into my third opponent is Merker. He's using Alola Marowak, Probopass, Steelix, Girafarig, Dusclops, and Poliwrath. Looking at his team, I know that I should probably lead with my Drifblim or my Alola Marowak. So going into game 1, I think I did lead with my Drifblim here. Nope, I led with my Alola Marowak, so we have a mirror match. So during this match, I am going to build up to a Shadow Ball, and I'm going to try to shield bait him with my Bone Club, in which I did get the shield and the swap out at the proper moment. I know this is a Shadow Ball, or a Bone Club. I thought it was a Shadow Ball, so I did use my block. I will launch a Shadow Ball at this Dusclops to try and inflict as much damage as I can. He did block it. That was a smart call on his move. He's going to throw a Shadow Punch at me. I will let that go through. I'm going to build up some energy on my Drifblim. We are at a 1-1 shield here, so I will build up to my Ominous Wind, and I will launch that at him. It takes off almost all of his health, and then I will just KO his Dusclops. I build up to an Ominous Wind, knowing that I'm not going to be able to get to the Shadow Ball. Throw an Ominous Wind at the Steelix, and then immediately switch into the Alola Marowak, and now I have him switch locked, and I have the advantage over the Steelix, in which he'll switch back into his Alola Marowak, and I think he throws a Shadow Ball here to KO my Alola Marowak. I don't know why I threw out my Drifblim, just to let him get killed and let him farm him down some. So I threw out my Poliwrath as the only Pokemon being left. He will hit me with the Shadow Ball. I will launch a Power-Up Punch in order to raise that attack power, and then I will try to farm him down with Bubbles. Throw one more Power-Up Punch out, and down goes the Alola Marowak. Out comes the Steelix. The problem with this is the Steelix already had the energy built up in order just to throw a Crunch and almost KO my Poliwrath. It would not let me throw that final Power-Up Punch. Going into our second match, I do lead with Drifblim. He comes in with Poliwrath. So I will start farming up energy with my Drifblim. Of course, we know this right here is going to be an Ice Punch. So we block it, and we're going to throw a Shadow Ball back at his Poliwrath. Or an Ominous Wind, my apologies. He does let it go through. He does get the switch in as I'm using Power-Up Punch here on his Alola Marowak. I get to another Power-Up Punch, and the whole point, once again, is to just continuously build up that bubble raw damage. So we're on our third Power-Up Punch. I should have shielded right here. This is a Shadow Ball. I knew he was going to throw a Shadow Ball at me. That let me know that he probably has a Steelix in the back. I did switch into my Drifblim once my Poliwrath was low on health. And now I will throw an Ominous Wind to try to get a buff out of it. But it's so hard getting these buffs on the Drifblims. We know this is an Ice Punch. He probably has the energy saved up once again. So we're going to go ahead and throw another Ominous Wind, which we do get his final shield. We know this is another Ice Punch. It will take us out. So, from this point, I think I threw Alola Marowak in. Nope, I threw my Poliwrath in. I did remember that I had extra energy saved up, so I let my Power-Up Punch off, and Steelix is right there in the back as I had suspected. And we know that Alola Marowak has the positive matchup against the Steelix. So we're going to let this Crunch come in and then Bone Club him, and that should be GG's for the second game. Going into our third game, I do decide to lead with the Drifblim again. I was thinking of bringing Gallade in the back. I made a big mistake by not doing that. as you'll see later in the video. So he leads with Alola Marowak, and I do have Drifblim, so I did get up to a Shadow Ball and figured I will just go ahead and throw the Shadow Ball, in which he blocked. That was a good call on him. He brings in his Dusclops. We know this is going to be a Shadow Punch, so we're going to throw up our shield, and then immediately switch into our Alola Marowak, which once again is another bad call on my end. So I am trying to get up to a Shadow Ball to store some energy, and then let the Bone Club off, which he did let go through. I will use my final shield on my Drifblim later on in the match. I get up to another Bone Club to try to bait his final shield, which I do get, and then he will farm down my Alola Marowak. From this point, I do throw in my Poliwrath, knowing that a Shadow Punch is going to be coming in. So I just tank that, and then I start trying to build up my bubble raw damage. I see his Alola Marowak come in. I should have immediately switched from my Poliwrath once the Shadow Ball, and in comes my Drifblim. This was a misplay on my end. I meant to hit Ominous Wind, but I hit Shadow Ball, and here comes his Probopass. This will knock out my Drifblim, and then my Poliwrath will come back in. And this is where I was talking about bringing Gallade to have in the back. Gallade versus Probopass with a no shield and one shield scenario does give Gallade the advantage over Probopass. I was really hoping right here that the Thunderbolt would at least leave me a little bit of hit points, but it didn't, and he KO'd me. So GG's Merker. Going up against my fourth opponent is Sloth Sweetheart. She is running Gallade, Steelix, Mawile, Drifblim, Poliwrath, and Alola Marowak. This is pretty much a mirror match team for me, except she is running the Gardevoir and I am running a Gallade. My preference is just Gallade over some of the outcomes that he has in the Sinister Cup. In no way, shape, or form should you pick one or the other. They both have their advantages and disadvantages. After seeing her team, I figured she would lead with Gardevoir. She did, so I led with my Drifblim. I will throw the Shadow Ball just to go ahead and try and KO that Gardevoir. She will throw up a shield. Good call on her part. And that charm damage is just destroying my Drifblim. So my Drifblim's gone, but I do have a 2-to-1 shield advantage. So I throw out my Steelix, knowing that I'm going to resist those charms. She is going to launch a Shadow Ball at me, and I will give her my first shield. I'm going to launch my first Crunch at her. I did not farm her up and save any energy. The next Pokemon she plays is Drifblim. I should have immediately swapped out right here, but I didn't. Instead, I stayed in with my Steelix and blocked her first Ominous Wind and countered it with a Crunch, which will do super effective damage, which she lets go through. Now I'm going to keep building up my energy. I see her Mawile come out, so I'm trying to shield bait her last shield with the Crunch, and I do get it. So I swap into my Alola Marowak, and although we are super weak, we have energy built up on our Steelix. She threw a power-up punch, so I will throw the Shadow Ball back at her to KO her Mawile. Out comes her Drifblim. She will throw a Shadow Ball or an Ominous Wind, either or. It'll KO that Marowak. She still has a little bit of energy saved up for, of course, another Ominous Wind. It almost KOs my Steelix, but he is able to deal that Dragon Tail neutral damage and KO that Drifblim. Going into the second game, I choose to lead with the Alola Marowak against her Mawile. I know that is a bad matchup for me, so I immediately switch into my Steelix. I'm going to build up enough energy to an Earthquake. And I think I threw the Earthquake immediately at her. Yes, I did. She did shield that. That was a good call on her part once again. And as you can see, that Mawile is just doing massive damage to my Steelix. So I do decide to keep my Steelix in. So I will throw a second Earthquake at her Mawile in hopes that I either A, get her second shield, but I don't. Her Mawile goes down. Out comes an Alola Marowak. So I switch to my Drifblim and then throw the first Shadow Ball that I get to, knowing that I'll be able to at least get to one more. She counters me with the Shadow Ball instead. And now we're both at no shields. So I switch back into my Steelix and I just go for the crunch. This will not KO that Alola Marowak, I believe. It almost does, and I'm just trying to deal neutral damage to her. I still do not know who her third Pokemon in the back is, so I reveal my third Alola Poke, which is the Alola Marowak. Her Steelix comes out. I'm already out of Bone Club. I know that I have this match just due to Alola Marowak having the advantage over Steelix with that Bone Club and how fast it charges up. My Alola Marowak during this tournament was also running Fire Spin, so that is going to deal even more damage to that Steelix due to his weakness to fire. And down goes Steelix, and that is GG's for that game. This was mid-game. I forgot to record once again, but I did remember mid-game. This is kind of the ending of the game. As you can see, she has a Steelix left. We're both out of shields. She KOs my Alola Marowak, and then I counter with a Mirror Match Steelix. Now my only objective here is just to get to the Earthquake, because I do know that Earthquake will KO that Steelix. I get up to it, and I let it rip, and down goes Steelix, and that is GG's to Sloth Sweetheart. Going into my fifth and final match is up against King Joker. His team consists of Probopass, Steelix, Medicham, Poliwrath, Alola Marowak, and Drifblim. So looking at this team lineup, I know that I should probably lead with my Drifblim and at least bring a Confusion user for majority of his team. So both of us lead with Drifblim. As you can see, it is a mirror match. He's going to let the first attack come in. It is an Ominous Wind. I just got to my Shadow Ball, and that's what let me know that he did not let a Shadow Ball come to me. So I will counter it with the Shadow Ball and then immediately switch to my Gallade. I will burn a shield right here for this other Ominous Wind that's coming. And then I will use my Leaf Blade just to KO that Drifblim. Now I have Gallade versus Medicham, which is a positive matchup for me. So I decide to keep my Gallade in here, not because it's switch locked. If I could have switched it, I still would have kept him in. Gallade still has the ability, just look at how much damage he does to that Medicham, and then he already has all that energy built up. I was not expecting a Poliwrath to come in. I should not have thrown that close combat. I should have thrown a Leaf Blade. Either way, we did get this second shield from him. So I decided to mirror match him with my Poliwrath. And now it's a race to power up punches to power up our Poliwraths, unless he has a Hydro Pump and decides to reveal that during this match. As soon as I could switch, I switched into my Drifblim to throw this Ominous Wind at his Poliwrath, just to do that little bit of damage. I know that this right here will do some damage to my Poliwrath, which it did. It was a Hydro Pump, but I got to my power up punch very fast, and that will KO his Poliwrath. Going into our second matchup, we see I have Poliwrath as a lead versus his Steelix lead. We know that this is a positive matchup for Poliwrath unless we eat the Earthquake. So I did block his first attack thinking he got to the Earthquake, although I was not watching him. I do not know if he did 6 or 7 attacks. So I'm just going to continuously get to my power-up punch and constantly throw those fighting moves to KO his Steelix as fast as I can. Out comes his Medicham. I keep my Poliwrath in for a second, throw another power-up punch to get his shield. He will throw a power-up punch back at me. So I decide to let that go through. I am farming him just a little bit right there, and now I will throw an Ice Punch, which he did make a good call on and did block. So I switch back into my Drifblim, knowing that that will give me the advantage. Or I'm sorry, I switch into my Drifblim once my Poliwrath goes down, which will give me the advantage right there. He comes out with the Probopass. So I throw a Shadow Ball at it, and then immediately switch into my Alola Marowak. I choose to burn my last shield to block that rock slide, and now I'm going to charge up a little bit to a Shadow Ball and throw a second Shadow Ball at the Probopass to KO the Probopass. Out comes his Medicham, and we know that I'm going to be 4 times resistant to fighting type moves, so whether it's a Psychic, we will tank that, and then I just wanted to throw the Shadow Ball at him because I still have one Pokemon in the back, so I was just challenging myself to get to it. Going into the third lineup, I brought Drifblim, Poliwrath, and Steelix. I chose to lead with Drifblim because that seemed to be the viable option against his team. And he also decides to lead with Drifblim as well. So once again, here we are at a mirror match. I am simply just watching for his first attack. Now I know this first attack is an Ominous Wind, but I do remember how much damage it did to me last game when he threw it at me and I did not shield it. So I throw a Shadow Ball at him, trying to just immediately KO him. Whether this is an Ominous Wind or not, it will do a lot of damage. I choose to keep my Drifblim in to try to pull his last shield or to at least KO that Drifblim. We do get his last shield, and now it's a race to this Ominous Wind. This Ominous Wind that he throws at me will KO my Drifblim. And then I do bring in my Poliwrath to start powering up those bubbles. Now I could have threw an Ice Punch right here, but I know he's out of shields, so I just wanted to power up my bubbles, as I stated previously. I will eat his first Ominous Wind and then just faint down his Drifblim. In comes his Alolan Marowak. I know that switching to Steelix is a bad option right here, but I was trying so hard to switch into it so I could get to at least 1 crunch. I did get sticky switched right there, as you could see. It would not let me change, which is perfectly fine. But the Alolan Marowak does have the match right here over Steelix due to the hit points. He didn't have enough left, so now it's a race to Earthquakes. So I try to build up enough just to make it, just to try to farm a little extra in hopes that I could do a little more damage before throwing that Earthquake. I noticed once he got to 7, he will launch another Earthquake back at me, and that will KO me. I would like to thank everyone in the Top Notch Triangle for coming out and supporting our tournament that we had, and a major thanks to everybody out there that watches my channel and supports me. If you like my channel, please subscribe and hit that like button. Jumpmaster out.